Hey everyone, Jason here with the JDstucks YouTube channel, and welcome to Layout Update 13 of Jason's O-Gauge Trains. It's been a minute since I've posted any new videos for YouTube.
One eternity later.
I do apologize for that, but it's because I was hard at work finishing my master's degree in business administration. I'm pleased to say that has been finished. I've graduated, which should mean more free time to make model train videos. There have been some other pretty significant life events happening for me as well, which I'll go into further detail in my next video. Trust me, all good things. But today, we're going to look at everything that's been done to the layout since Layout Update 12, specifically focusing on the track weathering, which, other than the roundhouse and peninsula area, is completely finished. I'll show you how I did it, the steps involved, and the final results. Plus, we'll look at additional layout progress that's been made as well, along with new locomotives and rolling stock that have been added. So sit back and relax as we dive into everything that's new on the layout right now on Jason's O-Gauge Trains. First, I want to thank all of my new subscribers to the channel. We're about to hit 15,000 subscribers, which is just awesome. So please hit the subscribe button below if you haven't already. I'd greatly appreciate your support. And as always, if you're shopping online for model trains and would like to support this channel, be sure to check out trains.com. They carry new and used trains from all scales and all manufacturers, offering a variety of products, locomotives, rolling stock, accessories, and electronics. I check out their website every day to see the new items that have been posted for sale. And if you shop at trains.com using my affiliate link in the description of this video, or simply use promo code JDstucks at checkout, not only will you be supporting this channel, but you will receive $10 off of your order of $50 or more. That's promo code JDstucks for $10 off of your next online order of $50 or more at trains.com. That's trains with a Z. All right, let's start with the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's look at the layout and see how my track weathering came out. Now, I've never weathered track before. This was a first for me. So you may ask, Jason, why even weather your track at all? Well, every time I build a layout, I try to make it better than the last. And while I'm certainly proud of the old layout that I built, the lack of track weathering really took away from some additional realism. I knew on this layout I wanted to push myself to the next level, and weathering the track to look more realistic and like the prototype was a natural next step. All of this track weathering was done using an airbrush, which I'll demonstrate for you shortly. But I started way in the back of the layout on the upper level, an area that will eventually be completely covered inside a mountain, which is good because this being my first time track weathering and using an airbrush, if I was gonna make a mistake, this is the spot to do it. So I worked my way around the upper level, first painting the ties one color, then coming back with a second color. I was very careful not to spray paint on the backdrop or the locomotives, rolling stock, or buildings. In these photos, you'll see all this blue painter's tape that I put down. Jason, why did you waste time putting down all this painter's tape? Won't any overspray be covered by scenery? Well, yes, you're right. You definitely don't have to do the painter's tape step like I did. The simple answer behind why I did it, I guess it's because I'm a little OCD. And it also may be a while before I have ground cover down to cover the plywood, so I wanted to keep a nice clean look around the cork roadbed. That's it. Call me crazy, but that was my personal preference. So I completed the upper level first, and I was actually very pleased with the results. Next was to move down the ramp and onto the middle level and repeat the process. Now, I painted the track a couple feet into the tunnel portals and under the elevated level, but then I stopped, one, because this track will never be seen, and second, to save paint. Here's a good comparison of how unweathered Atlas track looks compared to weathered Atlas track. And that's it. All of the track is weathered other than the ladder tracks in the middle of the layout and the peninsula and roundhouse area. Those areas are still being finalized, and once the track is down permanently, I will weather those areas as well. So now that you've seen how the track weathering came out, let me show you how I went about doing it. Now, I haven't done many tutorials over the years, so this is kind of a first for me. So I hope it turns out okay. I hope you learned something from it. Let's check it out. To demonstrate how I weather my track, I'm going to use a scrap piece of wood with some spare Atlas track. I'm already done weathering all the track on the layout, so we're going to do a little test sample piece like this one here. I'm going to start by corking the track, just like I have on the layout. I use Midwest Products O-Scale cork road bed. You break it in half, and you break it in half because it exposes one end to have a beveled edge and the other end is straight. I just use a box cutter, and all I have to do is score it a little bit, and then breaks right off. Put it right under the track like this. Okay, now to secure the track, I use these 3/4 inch wire nails. Just get these from the hardware store down the street. Some people like to secure their track with screws. I think the screw head is a little too large, and I think it's easy to over torque the screws and actually break the ties on the track. This is pretty simple. I start by putting the nail into one of the pre-drilled holes that Atlas has in their track. I push it down so it goes through the cork road bed, and then the proper tool is to use a nail punch. I'm just going to use this little extra drill extension I have with a hammer, and it doesn't really take more than a few taps to secure it in place. Doing nails may seem like overkill, and you might think, how the heck are you supposed to reuse the track? It's actually pretty easy to use a flathead screwdriver and get right under the nail head and pry it back up. The nice thing about using nails, the heads are so small. Once it's down and flat, after you paint over the ties, they blend in really well. So we have our test piece of track right here. This is what we're going to be weathering. Let me get my airbrush out. Now, I didn't go for some ultra expensive $500 airbrush. My dad actually got this for me back in November for my birthday. It's directly off of Amazon for less than $100. It was a Go Shear airbrush kit. And the first thing we're going to do is paint the ties. And for painting the ties, I decided to use this Mission Models Rail Tie Brown. Go figure, a paint called Rail Tie Brown. And I got this off of Amazon. Now, I do dilute the rail color with some airbrush thinner. I do 2 parts of paint, 1 part airbrush thinner, and I mix it in a jar before I pour it into the airbrush and start spraying. The rail color that will come back with second, this is actually discontinued paint made by Floquil. It's called Rail Brown. I would not recommend using this only because it's so hard to find. I bought all my bottles on eBay for way too much money. I decided that's what I absolutely had to have for my railroad, but I paid the price. Literally, it was over $20 a bottle when I could find it. I think sometimes I spend $30 or $40 a bottle, so don't do what I did. Go find a different replacement, but let's get started. Let's mix up a batch of the Rail Tie Brown first. Now I like to make sure that it's not too thick, not too thin. Now if it's your first time airbrushing, or really the first time ever pouring paint into your brush, it's good to test it out on a paper towel or see how your flow is. Looks like it's coming out pretty nice. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to come left to right. I'm going to do 2 passes on each side of the rail. I'm going to try to completely cover the rail ties, but I'm also going to try to get some overspray on the rail. That's not going to be a problem. We're going to come back with the rail color later, and it will actually blend really well if the rail tie color is also on the rail itself. So if I look really close, the paint is actually a little blotchy on the rail, which tells me I've diluted it a little too much. That's okay, we'll just do an extra pass, and when I fill up my next mix, I'll go a little bit heavier on the paint. Now the nice thing about having a test sample is that I can just lift this up, flip it around, and we can do the other side. Now that we're zoomed in on the rail, you can see a little bit better what I mean by saying it's a little blotchy on the rails. That's not too much of a problem because we're going to come back with the rail brown here in just a minute. What's really important is that the ties themselves have got a complete coat of paint over them, which they have. That's going to do a few things. It's going to obviously change the color of the ties. It's going to make them a little bit darker than how they come from the factory. It's also going to remove the shine, the plastic shine that comes on the ties. It makes it look a little bit more realistic. I'm going to let this dry for a minute, and we'll come back with the rail brown. Now while the paint dries, this is a really good time to wipe the top of the rails. The ideal way to do it is to have a second person wiping the top of the rails as you move along and paint your track. If you can't do that, I would do, maybe 5 to 10 feet at a time, take a break to clean the tops of the rails, and then continue going. I use denatured alcohol to clean my track, so I've got this little pad soaked with denatured alcohol, and I'm going to come across the tops of the rails, being very careful not to get any of the alcohol on the ties or the inside of the rails where I want that paint to stay. And there we go. Paint comes right off. As mentioned before, I'm using Floquil Rail Brown. It's a discontinued paint. I ended up using, I think, 6 bottles total for the entire layout. But when you consider it's discontinued and you have to buy it all on eBay for 20 to 30 bucks a pop, it gets pretty pricey real quick. The nice thing about using this paint is you actually don't have to dilute it at all. You can open it up, pour it right into the airbrush, and a little bit of paint goes a really long way. I am barely going to use any of this for this little test section of track. When I was looking for what color to use for the rail, I went around to the Real Railroad, one of my favorite places to rail fan, the Norfolk Southern Chicago line in Vermilion, Ohio, and it turns out that Rail Brown is very similar to the Real Railroad. And here's the good thing, the Real Railroad, rail colors vary everywhere you go. You could walk 10 feet and the color can change a little bit. It just depends on so many different factors. So there's no right or wrong color really that you can paint your rail or your ties. It's whatever you prefer. And for me, these two colors are what I prefer. So the paint is almost done drying, and I'm going to give you just a little preview of what we're going to try to do. With the airbrush here, I am going to aim it right at the rail, but I'm also going to try to get just a little bit of overspray onto the ties. That's prototypical in the real world. There's a little bit of the dirt and rust overspray from the rail that bleeds into the ties. So as I come across, I'm going to aim right for the middle of the rail with just a little bit getting on the tie. All right, I gotta say, I'm pretty darn happy with the way all those passes looked. So I'm going to flip my sample over again, and let's do the same thing. 2 passes on all 3 rails, and we're going to aim right for the middle of the rail with getting a little bit of overspray onto the ties. And if you remember those blotchy spots that were on the rail, well, this color is completely covering it up, and actually any kind of little peek through of the dark rail tie color actually looks really good. I think it adds a little bit of realism to it, if I'm honest. And again, I didn't have to dilute this color at all. Just shook the bottle well, poured it right into the airbrush, and started spraying. I will say this Flowcool paint, very strong smell. You're gonna want to wear a mask. You're gonna want to have your room well ventilated because the fumes can really get to your head quickly being down in a basement. So I'm actually quite happy with the way this track is looking now. Some of you might be perfectly happy with this. You would clean the tops of the rails and start running your trains. I think the rail tie color is still a little too dark for my personal taste. So I'm actually going to do one more pass with the rail brown. This is going to be a really light pass just over the ties to kind of blend the rail brown into the rail tie brown. That's just my personal preference. You don't have to do that, but I'm going to do that to see if I like that result anymore. And like I did before, I'm going to come back with my cleaning pad while the paint is still somewhat fresh. Now, once you're all done painting the track, my recommendation is to clean up for the day, let it dry for a few hours, or even come back to it the next day and look for any spots that maybe you missed, because it's really easy to just come back with the same color of paint and touch up anything you might have missed. I had to do that a few different times on my layout, nothing wrong with that. Now that's where I was going to finish, because technically what I just did here is what I did to the entire layout to weather the track. But I have something right here. Ugh. This is a tub full of recycled ballast from the old layout. So let me show you how I intend to ballast the track on the whole layout on this little sample. This is Woodland Scenic's coarse gray blend, and I darkened it a little bit more with flat black spray paint. I think I'll end up darkening it even further when I ballast the actual layout, but we're going to use the ballast just as it is right now. It's pretty simple. I usually begin with my middle rails, and I just overflow it a little bit, get it completely between the ties so that it's a little bit heavier than it needs to be. And then I come back with the paintbrush and kind of batten it down, make sure it gets between the ties. Then I kind of start to sweep it along, pushing it forward, making sure that the top of the tie becomes exposed, really getting the ballast all the way down between the ties. And if it's too much, well, get out your shop vac, vacuum it up, and start over. Now I'll come back along the sides, and I kind of do two passes here. It doesn't have to be perfect, just enough to cover that cork. There we go. And now I kind of come by and do the same thing. I push the ballast between the ties, brush it off so that I can see the top of the ties. The ballast comes right up to the side of the tie. I don't like the look of the edge of the tie being completely exposed. I like the ballast to come right up to the edge of it. I think that's prototypical. Now usually you wouldn't ballast until ground cover is down. Ballasting is usually one of the last things you would do for a railroad. I figure I might as well show you how to do it now. And there we have it. There's some ballasted track. Now if we zoom in close, it looks pretty good. But as I mentioned, I think I'm going to darken my ballast a little bit more. I think it's a little too light for my liking. And there's another step that I haven't done yet, which is I come back after the ballast is all glued in place and it's secure. I come back one more time with that rail brown and I spray one more pass to actually get some of the rail brown color onto the ballast. If I show a picture of this sample right here, this is another test sample I did similar to the one we just did, except I actually glued the ballast in place on this and came back and did an extra spray, an extra pass of the rail brown to blend it a little bit further into the ballast. I was really happy with the result of that. So there you have it. That is how I weathered my track. I think it looks pretty good. I'm really happy with the result. I know it took me quite a while to finally bite the bullet and do it. You know, weathering track is a little scary, especially when it's Atlas track, which is probably the most expensive 3-rail O-gauge track on the market. It's always scary to take paint to something that pricey, but once I got going, once I knew I had a result that I liked, it was actually a lot of fun to paint everything. And as you can see here, I think it looks pretty good, and it's been all the more fun to operate the trains on the railroad. And remember, there are countless ways that you can weather your track. My method just works for me. If you have a different method you want to try, or you have a method that works better for you, by all means use it. It's your railroad. Do what makes you happy. And again, I'm not really one for tutorials, so I hope you found this beneficial, and I hope at least one of you out there felt like you learned something and might be able to use some of my methods in your track weathering. So with that thorough review of my track weathering and how I did it, let's move on to looking at some of the other progress that's been made on the layout. The peninsula continues to undergo track modifications. I'm pretty much set on the intermodal area over here, but I've changed the track leading to the turntable. I originally had 4 tracks all leading to the turntable, which was a bit much and didn't look right. So I took 1 track out and settled on this plan. Now I have 2 primary tracks that lead to and from the turntable, so 1 locomotive can be leaving as another one comes in, and 1 track whose primary function is coal delivery for the coal tower. With the 4th track removed, I now have room towards the edge of the table. I will likely do 2 to 3 stub tracks coming off of the turntable, kind of like you see here. Maybe I'll add a sand tower or sand pit in this area. Maybe it will function as another maintenance spot. Not exactly sure yet, but I think it will be better use of this space, and I'm quite happy with it. If we leave the peninsula and come all the way back to the opposite side of the layout, I also corked the inner loop of the upper level. I was originally going to leave it on the bare plywood to model 2 different grades of track, but decided that adding cork would result in smoother, quieter operations. And it's an 072 loop, so my big steam engines like the triplex can operate on this loop much smoother. I also received some new K&R custom signals. Almost all of the signals on the layout are made by them, and they recently updated their board design by incorporating a brief delay in signal aspect changes. When using an insulated rail for signal activation like I am, this eliminates any signal flicker that may be caused by dirty wheels or track. I was getting around this problem by using JDstucks relays, but now I don't have to use those thanks to the new design. So I replaced a few of my signals on the layout with this new board design, and I also added 2 others to the upper level. The location of these aren't permanent, but I think they make sense as they will indicate the position of switches that are hard for me to see. Now let's move on to the new locomotives that have been added to the layout, starting with this beautiful MTH Premier Conrail SD70 Mac, MTH item number 20-20450-1. I've gone kind of Conrail crazy lately, and I've been on the hunt for more Conrail for the layout. This is one that I really wanted to have, and thanks to a tip from a friend, I found this one on eBay within minutes of it being posted and bought it right away. Next is this MTH Premier Canadian National SD70i, which is MTH item number 20-20610-1. I acquired this locomotive from my good friend Charlie, who is thinning out his fleet of modern locomotives, so a big thanks to Charlie. This is an older MTH model and is equipped with ProtoSound 2.0, but it runs great, looks great, and is actually the first Canadian National locomotive on the layout. I'm really happy to have this one in the collection. Now, this is a really cool and unique locomotive. I don't think I have anything quite like this on the layout. This is a brand new MTH Premier Line Nickel Plate Road H10-44. It's a Stockyard Express exclusive, meaning it can only be purchased from Stockyard Express in Oberlin, Ohio. And to make it even more unique, it has this script on the side, East 55th Street Yard, Cleveland. This former nickel plate yard is now where the Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, or RTA, operates its rail facility. As someone from Cleveland who grew up along the nickel plate line and often rode the RTA to Cleveland Indians games, this is a special locomotive for me. And it's made even more special because it was a graduation gift from my mom and dad when I completed my MBA program last month. My dad actually gave me a New York Central Hudson when I graduated high school, and now they surprised me with this locomotive. Such a generous gift from them. It made me feel like a little kid again, and I will cherish it forever. And that's all for new locomotives. Can you believe it? No new Norfolk Southern engines? I guess I don't have a problem after all. I don't have a problem. 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 Moving on to rolling stock, I recently acquired these two Atlas Masterline BNSF Berwick boxcars. I purchased them from my buddy Christian. I love Atlas Berwicks. They're one of the greatest freight cars ever made in O-scale, and I have a bunch of them. And I'm pre-ordering more out of the new Atlas O catalog. If you've been on the fence about purchasing some of these, I highly recommend you order some from Atlas. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. I also acquired these two Atlas tank cars from my buddy Clem, a Detroit 3-Railer member. These are 33,000 gallon tank cars that Atlas came out with in the early 2000s, and I don't think they've made them since. Beautiful modern tank cars that I've been on the hunt for many years. Big thanks to Clem for thinking of me when he put them up for sale. Now here's something I'm really excited about, and I wasn't even sure it was going to make it into the video, but I just picked it up today from my buddy Dave Lambert. It's this end of train device that he was able to 3D print an adapter to allow me to use the MTH end of train device on a Bowser/Weaver road railer. The road railer train is one of my favorites on the layout, but it's never had an end of train device. So thanks to him, I was able to attach this quite easily. Now I have an end of train device for my Triple Crown road railer train. Thank you so much, Dave. This really completes the road railer train. So what's next for the layout? Well, there are several things to focus on. One is to make bridge piers for the Atlas Pratt truss bridges. I've been working with my buddy Dave Lambert to 3D print some piers. We even tried making a plaster mold, but that experiment is just that, an experiment. I also really need to start construction on my roundhouse and finalize the track and wiring in the peninsula. I also want to add fascia to the edge of the layout and add black curtains all the way around to clean up the look. But perhaps most exciting is that I can finally begin making tunnels and tunnel liners, as well as begin rough construction on the mountains. I'm really excited about that. So a lot to do on the layout and a lot of fun new videos to make, and it looks like I'll finally have some free time to do both of those things this summer. And also, I'm pleased to announce that I have launched the JDstucks Discord server. You can find the link to that server in the description of this video. It's a great place to continue model railroad discussion. I post regular sneak peeks of the layout and projects I'm working on, and even do the occasional live chat. So if something like that sounds interesting to you, feel free to join my Discord server, link in the description of this video. Well, that's going to do it for this layout update. As always, I'll leave you with footage of the trains running. I hope you enjoyed my track weathering tutorial, as well as seeing all the new items that have been added and progress that's been made to the layout. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Post your questions and comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. been so long, I don't even remember what I say. Hey everyone.
Blah, 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 trains.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back, folks. Finishing my master's degree in business ethics. I got paint all over my hands, all over my shirt, all over my face. Ugh, the things I do for YouTube. Trains, 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 and trains. That's what we got on this little layout, and that's what I like about it. Like the triplex, here, but why can't I speak?